The grand hall of the Zarin Empire was filled with silence. A line of alien nobles stood before the throne, their elegant robes shimmering under the soft glow of crystal lights. Princess Valtris sat with a bored expression, her golden eyes scanning the room with little interest. Another suitor, another waste of time. "You are strong, princess," the warrior before her declared, pounding his chest. His scales shimmered with pride. "With me by your side, our empire will grow even greater." Valtris sighed. "You say the same words as the last 10 before you," she said, resting her chin on her hand. "Is there no one with originality?" Gasps filled the hall. Rejecting a suitor was not uncommon, but doing it so bluntly was a sign of disrespect. The emperor, her father, shifted in his seat but said nothing. He had long since stopped trying to control her. The noble warrior clenched his fists but bowed stiffly. "You will regret turning away strong allies, princess." She watched as he stormed out, just like all the others. It was always the same. Warriors boasting about their strength, diplomats promising power, nobles seeking status, but not one of them truly interested her. As the doors shut behind the latest failure, Valtris leaned back in her chair. Her advisors whispered among themselves, worried about her stubbornness. She didn't care. The idea of marrying for tradition or duty disgusted her. She wanted something different, something worth her time. Then a quiet chime echoed through the hall. A royal guard rushed in, his face tense with urgency. "Princess, an unidentified vessel has entered our sector," he announced. "A Terran ship." Valtris's ears perked up. A human ship. That was unusual. Humans were rare in Zarin space, usually keeping to their own trade routes. "Terrans," one of the nobles scoffed. "They are primitive. What business do they have here?" Valtris ignored the comment. She had never met a human before, but she had heard stories. Unlike most species, they did not conquer through force alone. They used intelligence, adaptability, and sheer stubbornness to survive. They were unpredictable, and that made them interesting. "Bring them in," she ordered. The court murmured in shock. "Princess, that is." "Did I stutter?" Her sharp gaze silenced the protests. "If a human has dared enter our space, I want to see them." Her father watched her carefully but said nothing. He had learned long ago that once Valtris made up her mind, no one could change it. The guard bowed and hurried off. Valtris sat forward, suddenly more awake than she had been in months. She had rejected every suitor before, and none had intrigued her. But now, for the first time, her heart raced with curiosity. What kind of fool would fly a human ship straight into the heart of the Zarin Empire? She was about to find out. The great doors of the imperial court swung open, and the guards stepped inside, leading the unexpected visitor. The nobles whispered among themselves as they got their first look at the human. He was tall for his species, his stance relaxed but confident. His dark flight suit was slightly worn, hinting at long journeys through space. His face was unreadable, but his sharp eyes scanned the room as if he had nothing to fear. Princess Valtris leaned forward on her throne, studying him with interest. The guards pushed him forward, making him kneel. "Commander Isaac Mercer, pilot of the Wayfarer," one of them announced, "caught trespassing in Zarin space." Mercer looked up, meeting Valtris's gaze without hesitation. He didn't look frightened or intimidated, just mildly annoyed. "I didn't trespass," he said calmly. "My ship had engine trouble. I sent a distress signal. Instead of help, you sent a war fleet after me." Gasps filled the hall. No outsider had ever spoken so casually in the presence of the royal family. A noble sneered. "You should be grateful we didn't destroy you on sight, Terran." Mercer smirked. "I'd rather be rescued than blown up, if it's all the same to you." Valtris chuckled. The human was bold, different from the warriors who groveled for her attention. She could see it now. The way he carried himself, the sharp wit in his words. He was nothing like the nobles of her empire. Her father, the emperor, finally spoke. Your kind does not belong in our territory, human. Why should I not have you executed? Mercer's smirk didn't fade. Well, for starters, I haven't done anything wrong. Killing an unarmed pilot isn't exactly honorable, is it? He glanced at Valtris. Unless your empire doesn't care about honor. A tense silence followed. The nobles bristled, but Valtris smiled. He was fearless. She stood from her throne, stepping forward. Tell me, Mercer, you've traveled through the stars, seen many places. What is it that humans seek? Mercer's expression softened slightly. Freedom, he said. Adventure. We go where we aren't wanted. We survive where we shouldn't. We take risks because that's what makes life worth living. Valtris tilted her head, intrigued. And what of power? Wealth? Do you not chase such things? Mercer shrugged. Some do, but not me. I just want to explore. She studied him for a moment longer. Then she turned to the court. This human will not be executed. The nobles erupted in protest. Princess, you cannot. She silenced them with a raised hand. He has done nothing to deserve death. Instead, I wish to test him. Mercer raised an eyebrow. Test me. She smirked. Yes. A series of trials. If you are as capable as you claim, you will survive. The human exhaled, shaking his head with amusement. I knew this day was gonna be weird. Valtris's smile widened. This was going to be fun. The grand chamber of the Zerin Palace buzzed with excitement. It was rare for an outsider to be given a trial, let alone a human. The nobles whispered among themselves, some eager to see the human fail, others curious to witness his skills. Commander Isaac Mercer stood in the center of the arena, arms crossed, watching as the guards prepared for the first trial. He had no idea what to expect, but one thing was clear. These aliens weren't going to make it easy for him. Princess Valtris sat on her throne, her golden eyes fixed on him. Your first test is one of intelligence, she announced, a battle of strategy. You will face one of our war masters in a simulation. If you lose, you will be considered unworthy. Mercer sighed. A strategy game. Could have just given me a math quiz. The noble scoffed at his casual attitude, but Valtris smirked. Begin. A holographic battlefield appeared before them, displaying warships, ground forces, and tactical positions. The War Master, a massive Zerin general, took his position across from Mercer. Prepare yourself, human. You will learn what true strategy is. The game began. The War Master moved first, deploying overwhelming firepower, crushing Mercer's forces in minutes. The nobles laughed, already celebrating his failure. But then Mercer leaned forward. All right, my turn. He started making unpredictable moves. Instead of fighting head-on, he tricked the War Master's forces into traps. He sacrificed smaller ships to lure the enemy into ambushes. He hacked into the simulation's mechanics, altering battlefield conditions in ways no Zerin had ever considered. The nobles' laughter faded as the War Master's fleet crumbled. Within minutes, Mercer's forces overwhelmed the battlefield. His final move cut off the War Master's supply lines, forcing his surrender. Silence filled the chamber. Mercer leaned back, arms behind his head. Well, that was fun. The War Master's face darkened with humiliation. You cheated. Mercer smirked. I played smart. Your army was bigger, stronger. But humans? We don't fight fair. We fight to win. Valtris's eyes gleamed with amusement. He had impressed her. Again. She stood. The human has passed the first trial. Some nobles grumbled, while others looked at Mercer with newfound respect. He wasn't just lucky. He was dangerous in ways they hadn't expected. Mercer stretched. So, what's next? Arm wrestling. A riddle contest. Valtris chuckled. No, next is a test of combat. She gestured to a towering Zerin warrior stepping into the arena, a curved energy blade in his hands. You will duel one of our finest. Mercer exhaled, cracking his knuckles. Figures. As the warrior raised his blade, Mercer rolled his shoulders. He didn't have fancy alien strength, but what he did have was human adaptability, and he was about to show them just how much that mattered. The crowd gathered around the grand dueling arena, their excitement rising. This was the moment they had been waiting for, the moment the human would fall. Commander Isaac Mercer stood in the center, rolling his shoulders. Across from him, his opponent stepped forward, a towering Zerin warrior named Jorek, known for his speed and brutal combat skills. His sharp energy blade hummed, reflecting the chamber's golden light. "The rules are simple," Princess Valtris announced from her throne. "The duel ends when one combatant surrenders, is knocked unconscious, or unable to continue." She leaned forward slightly, her golden eyes locked on Mercer. "Do you understand, human?" Mercer smirked. Yeah. Don't die." "Got it." Jarek let out a low growl. "You will regret your arrogance." The gong rang, and Jarek moved like lightning. His blade cut through the air, aiming straight for Mercer's chest. But Mercer wasn't there. With quick footwork, Mercer sidestepped, narrowly avoiding the strike. Jarek swung again, but Mercer ducked and rolled, keeping just out of reach. He wasn't stronger, but he was faster. The nobles scoffed. "The human is only running. Is he too afraid to fight?" Mercer smirked as he dodged another slash. "Not afraid. Just smart." Jarek lunged again, but this time, Mercer reacted differently. Instead of dodging, he stepped inside the warrior's range. Using Jarek's momentum against him, he slammed an elbow into the warrior's ribs. Jarek staggered back, shocked. The nobles gasped. Mercer took a step back and raised his fists. Round 2. Jarek roared, now furious. He rushed forward, swinging wildly, but Mercer stayed calm. He weaved between the attacks, dodging, waiting for an opening. And then he saw it. Jarek raised his blade high for a powerful downward strike. It was strong, but predictable. Mercer moved fast. At the last second, he sidestepped and kicked Jarek's knee hard. The warrior's leg buckled, throwing him off balance. Before Jarek could recover, Mercer moved in. He grabbed the warrior's wrist, twisted it sharply, and with a precise strike to the arm, the energy blade fell from Jarek's grip. Silence filled the chamber. Mercer picked up the fallen blade, twirling it casually. "Think this belongs to me now." Jarek, humiliated, clenched his fists. But he knew the truth. He had lost. He took a deep breath, then bowed. "You are worthy." The nobles were stunned. A human had beaten one of their strongest warriors. Valtris, watching closely, smiled. This human was not only skilled, he was unpredictable. She stood. "The human has passed the second trial." Mercer tossed the blade back to Jarek. "Good fight, big guy." As the crowd whispered in shock, Valtris stepped down from her throne. "One final trial remains," she said. "A test of endurance. And this one may be the hardest yet." Mercer sighed. "Of course it is." The challenge wasn't over. Not yet. The air inside the palace grew tense. Mercer had won the strategy game. He had defeated one of their best warriors in combat. But now he faced the final trial, the most difficult one. Princess Valtris stood before the crowd, her golden eyes gleaming. "Your last test is one of endurance," she announced. "You must cross the burning dunes, a brutal wasteland where only the strongest survive." The nobles murmured among themselves. The burning dunes was a deadly region filled with shifting sand, extreme heat, and creatures that hunted anything that moved. Even elite Zerin warriors struggled to cross it. Mercer raised an eyebrow. "So you're dropping me into a death trap?" "Nice." Valtris smirked. "You've proven your mind is sharp and your body is strong. But can you endure?" Mercer sighed, rolling his shoulders. "Guess we're about to find out." Hours later, Mercer stood at the edge of the dunes. The twin suns of Zerin Prime blazed in the sky, turning the landscape into an endless sea of fire-colored sand. A noble beside Valtris scoffed. The human will perish within the first hour. But Valtris only watched in silence. Mercer took a deep breath and stepped forward. Immediately, the heat hit him like a wall. The sand beneath his boots felt like molten rock. His clothes clung to his skin, drenched in sweat. He had no weapons, no supplies, just his wits. He moved carefully, conserving his energy. The Zerin warriors had failed here because they relied on brute strength. But humans? Humans were different. They were survivors. Hours passed, then a full day. Mercer's throat was dry, his body weak. He had found no water, and the heat was merciless. His vision blurred, but he kept moving. Suddenly, the ground beneath him shifted. A massive sandworm burst from the dunes, its sharp fangs glinting in the sunlight. Mercer reacted instantly. He dove to the side, rolling across the sand as the beast lunged. He had no weapons, but he didn't need them. He had a plan. He reached into the sand, grabbing a sharp rock. As the worm attacked again, he leaped onto its back, holding on as it thrashed wildly. With one precise strike, he drove the rock into its eye. The beast roared in pain and collapsed. Mercer rolled off its body, breathing heavily. His arms trembled, his legs barely held him up, but he was still alive. 3 days later, as the sun set over the palace, the crowd gathered in shock. A lone figure appeared on the horizon, staggering but unbroken. Mercer had survived. The nobles were speechless. Valtris stood, her heart pounding. He had done it. He had endured. She stepped forward as Mercer collapsed at the palace steps. "You," she whispered, staring down at him, "are truly unlike any I have ever met." And for the first time, she felt something unexpected. Respect. And maybe something more. The grand palace was silent. Nobles, warriors, and advisors stood frozen in disbelief as the human, Isaac Mercer, collapsed onto the steps, exhausted but victorious. He had done the impossible, survived the burning dunes, battled a sandworm, and returned alive. Mercer lay on the cool stone floor, breathing heavily. His body ached, his throat burned with thirst, but he managed a weak smile. "I made it back," he muttered. "Didn't think I'd be saying that." Princess Valtris stepped forward, her golden eyes locked onto him. She had tested him, doubted him, and watched him prove himself time and time again. This was no ordinary human. He was different. A servant rushed forward with a bowl of water. Valtris took it herself, kneeling beside Mercer. The nobles gasped. A princess kneeling for a human. It was unheard of. She held the bowl to his lips. "Drink," she ordered. Mercer, too tired to argue, took slow sips, feeling life return to his body. He exhaled and looked up at her. "So, did I pass?" Valtris smirked. "You did more than pass." She stood and turned to the court. "This human has completed every trial. He has outwitted our strategists, outmatched our warriors, and survived where even our own people fail." Her voice was firm, commanding. "I have made my decision." The nobles braced themselves. "I choose him." A wave of shocked murmurs spread through the hall. Some nobles looked outraged, others stunned. An elder noble stepped forward. "Princess, you cannot be serious. He is a human. He is not worthy of the throne." Valtris's sharp glare silenced him instantly. "I am the one who decides worth." She looked at Mercer again, her expression unreadable. "And I say he has earned his place." Mercer blinked. He had expected a reward, maybe his freedom. But this. "You want me to?" "Yes," Valtris said simply, "by my side." The Emperor watched everything unfold, his expression unreadable. Then he let out a deep sigh. "If this is your choice, daughter, then so be it." The court was in chaos. Some nobles stormed out, others whispered furiously. But Valtris didn't care. She had spent her life surrounded by suitors who only wanted power. Mercer was the first to truly prove himself. Mercer sat up, rubbing his neck. Well, I gotta say, I didn't expect this when I crash-landed. Valtris smirked. Neither did I. He stretched his sore arms and looked at her seriously. So, what happens now? The princess stepped closer, offering her hand. Now, Mercer, we shake the foundations of this empire. He hesitated for a moment, then took her hand. It was warm, strong. The human and the alien princess had made their choice, and nothing in the galaxy would ever be the same again. The news of Valtris's decision spread quickly through the Zerin Empire. Whispers of outrage turned into roars of dissent. Rival houses who had long awaited an excuse to challenge her family's rule seized this moment. To them, her choice of a human, a complete outsider, was the ultimate insult to tradition. In the quiet halls of the royal palace, Mercer stood beside Valtris as she surveyed the reports. Noble houses were arming their fleets. Spies whispered of assassins being hired. Even members of her father's inner circle were questioning her judgment. I didn't expect it to be easy, she said, her voice calm but firm. Easy? Mercer leaned against the wall, arms crossed. They're ready to tear you apart, and they'll happily take me down with you. She glanced at him, a small smirk on her lips. You're still here, aren't you? He shrugged. I've already faced your trials. What's a galactic rebellion compared to that? Her smirk faded as she looked back at the holographic map. They're gathering strength. If we don't act, this could turn into a civil war. Mercer approached the table, studying the map. Then we can't just sit around. What's the plan? Before Valtris could answer, a young guard rushed in, bowing quickly. Your Highness, we've received word. An attack fleet is on its way. They mean to remove you by force. Valtris's eyes narrowed. How many ships? 10, maybe more, the guard replied, his voice trembling. Mercer let out a low whistle. Guess they're not big on subtlety. Valtris straightened, her tone sharp and commanding. Send word to all loyal forces. I want a defense fleet ready immediately. The guard hesitated. But, Princess, many of our commanders are hesitant to follow these orders. They don't trust your decision. Valtris stiffened, but Mercer spoke first. Then don't send a request, send a challenge. Both Valtris and the guard turned to him. You've got loyal commanders out there, Mercer said. The ones who stood by you before. Call them out. Tell them to step up and prove their loyalty. No fence-sitters. They're either with you or they're not. Valtris stared at him for a moment, then nodded slowly. Do it, she said to the guard. Gather those who stand with us. We make our stand here. The guard hurried off. Mercer tapped the map, eyeing the incoming fleet's formation. If they're coming for you, they'll expect a straightforward defense. We can use that against them. Valtris raised an eyebrow. You have a plan. Not yet, Mercer admitted, but give me a few hours. I'll come up with something. Despite the gravity of the situation, Valtris allowed herself a small smile. You truly are a reckless human. Yeah, Mercer said, meeting her gaze. But reckless works. As the palace prepared for war, both the human and the princess knew they would need every ounce of cunning, courage, and luck to survive what was coming. The palace was alive with activity. Soldiers rushed through the halls, preparing weapons and coordinating defenses. Valtris stood at the command center, her sharp gaze fixed on the holographic map. The enemy fleet was nearing, their formation bold and unrelenting. Commander Isaac Mercer leaned over the display, tapping one of the enemy markers. They're coming in hard. They think you're going to panic. Throw everything at them in a desperate stand. Valtris frowned. And we won't. Not if we're smart, Mercer replied. They expect a head-on fight. Let's give them something they don't see coming. He pointed to a series of asteroid fields nearby. Those rocks are unstable, right? If we detonate a few charges in the field as their fleet passes through, we could break their formation. One of Valtris's advisors shook his head. That's reckless. If it fails, we'll have nothing left to defend ourselves. Yeah, Mercer said with a shrug. "But if it works, they'll lose their advantage. Their tightly packed ships will scatter, making it easier for us to pick them off." Valtris studied the plan. It was risky, dangerous. But that was what made it perfect. She nodded slowly. "We'll do it. Start the preparations." As the enemy fleet approached the outer edge of the system, the Zarian forces moved into position. The asteroids floated silently, their jagged surfaces glinting in the light of the distant suns. Mercer's plan was to trigger controlled explosions at key points, forcing the attackers to break formation or risk being torn apart by debris. Valtris watched from the main command deck as her fleet took up positions. "Are you sure this will work?" she asked Mercer. He stood beside her, arms crossed. "Not really," he admitted, "but it's the best shot we've got." Valtris smirked despite the tension. "Reckless as always." He returned the smirk. "That's what you like about me, isn't it?" Her eyes narrowed, but she didn't reply. Instead, she turned to her officers. "Begin the operation." The first explosion sent shockwaves through the asteroid field. Massive rocks tumbled into the path of the advancing fleet. Several enemy ships attempted to dodge but collided with debris, their shields sparking and failing. The once perfect enemy formation crumbled. Ships scattered in all directions, their captains scrambling to regain control. In the chaos, the Zarian defenders launched a counterattack. Fighters and cruisers struck hard and fast, targeting the disoriented invaders. On the command deck, Mercer watched the battle unfold. "They're breaking apart," he said. "Now's our chance to press them." Valtris issued the order, her voice steady and confident. "All ships, advance. Show them the strength of the Zarian Empire." The defenders surged forward, cutting through the disorganized enemy forces. One by one, the invading ships either retreated or were destroyed. The Zarian capital buzzed with the news of the victory. What had started as a potential rebellion against Princess Valtris's choice ended in a triumph that shook the empire. The attackers had been repelled, their fleet scattered. Yet the victory was not without cost. Loyal warriors had fallen, and parts of the city lay damaged from the brief skirmishes. Isaac Mercer walked the halls of the royal palace, his steps slower than usual. He still felt the exhaustion of the battle, but more than that, he felt the weight of what had happened. He had gambled everything on a risky strategy, and it had worked. But now he wondered, what came next? He stopped in front of the grand chamber where Valtris sat alone, staring out a massive window at the sprawling city below. Her posture was calm, but he could sense the tension in her shoulders. "You should be celebrating," Mercer said, leaning against the doorway. "We won." Valtris didn't turn. "It's not that simple. Winning a battle doesn't end the war. The houses that supported the rebellion are still out there, waiting for another chance. And the court is still divided about you." Mercer sighed and stepped inside. "Yeah, I noticed the stairs. They don't trust me. I'm just the outsider, right?" She turned to face him, her golden eyes steady. "It's not just that you're an outsider. You've changed the way we think, the way we fight. Some see that as a strength. Others see it as a threat." He crossed his arms, a small grin on his face. "Well, I guess I'm good at shaking things up." Valtris allowed a faint smile before returning her gaze to the city. "You've made enemies, Mercer. The old guard sees you as a danger to everything they know. They'll keep testing us, pushing back, until we either stand strong or break apart." "And you're worried we won't stand strong?" he asked. She shook her head. "No, I'm worried that the more we push forward, the more blood will be spilled. The people want stability, not endless conflict." He moved closer, his tone softening. "So, what are you saying? That we back down?" "Never," she said firmly. "But we need to be smart, not just in battle, but in politics. We need to show the Empire that this isn't about tradition versus change. It's about survival and growth. If they can see that you're not here to destroy our culture but to strengthen it, maybe we can avoid another war." Mercer let her words sink in, He wasn't used to thinking about politics or diplomacy. He was a fighter, a survivor, but he understood the truth in her words. "All right," he said. "What's the plan?" Valtris turned back to him, her expression thoughtful. "We build alliances. We prove that you're more than just a human from a distant world. We show them you're part of the Zerrin Empire's future." Mercer nodded, a determined spark in his eyes. "Then let's get started." The two stood together, their resolve unshaken. It wasn't over yet, but for the first time, the Empire had a chance to become something greater. And it was all because of a human who had dared to step into their world. The royal palace gleamed in the soft light of the twin suns, where once its halls echoed with whispers of doubt, they now hummed with cautious hope. The Zerrin Empire, long bound by unyielding traditions, was beginning to shift. Princess Valtris stood on the balcony overlooking the capital. The city was alive with movement, builders repairing damaged structures, merchants reopening markets, families tentatively returning to their routines. Victory over the rebellion had restored a fragile peace, but the scars of conflict were still visible. Isaac Mercer joined her, leaning against the railing. He had swapped his worn flight suit for something more formal, though he still looked out of place among the Empire's ornate finery. His easygoing smile and straightforward demeanor hadn't changed. "You know," he said, breaking the silence, "when I first crash-landed here, I thought I'd be lucky to get out alive. Didn't expect to end up, well, here." Valtris glanced at him. "Neither did I. But you earned your place." Mercer shrugged. "Maybe, but it's not like everyone's throwing me a welcome party." She nodded. "There are still those who oppose us. They'll keep testing our strength. But that's why we need to keep proving them wrong, not just with words, but with actions." "That's the easy part," Mercer said, smirking. "I've gotten pretty good at defying expectations." A small smile touched her lips. "That you have." They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, watching the bustling city. Then Valtris spoke again. "You changed things, Mercer, not just for me, but for the entire Empire. You showed us that strength doesn't just come from tradition or power. It comes from adaptability, creativity, and determination. And that's something we've been missing." Mercer raised an eyebrow. "You make me sound like some kind of hero." Valtris tilted her head, her gaze steady. "You are, in your own way." The weight of her words lingered between them. Mercer looked away, scratching the back of his neck. "So what now? What's next for the Zerrin Empire?" She turned her gaze back to the horizon. "Now we rebuild. We form alliances with those who are willing to see a stronger, more unified empire. We protect our people while opening ourselves to new ideas. And we keep pushing forward, even when it's hard." He nodded, his expression serious. "Sounds like a long road." "It is," she said, "but it's worth it." Mercer looked at her, seeing the strength in her eyes. She wasn't just a princess. She was a leader who had chosen him not because of his status, but because of his spirit. He smiled faintly. "Guess I'm sticking around for a while." Then, Valtris met his gaze. "I wouldn't have it any other way." As they stood together, the twin suns rose higher, casting their light over a city and an empire on the brink of a new era. For the first time in generations, there was hope. And at the heart of it all was the human who had defied the odds and changed their world.